Tokens are the fuel that Claude runs on. Every message that you send, every file that it reads, and every response that it writes all cost tokens. One token is roughly 4 characters, which works out to be about 3/4 of a word in English on average. So 1,000 tokens is somewhere around 750 words or 2 or 3 pages of text. And other languages can differ slightly in cost. Now here's the part that most people don't realise. Every time that you send a message, Claude doesn't just read your latest prompt, it rereads the entire conversation from the beginning to understand the context. So message number 20 costs significantly more than message number 1 because you're paying for all 19 previous exchanges again every single time. And that one insight might change how you use Claude going forward, and we'll come back to it soon. Now, most plans also work on a rolling 5-hour window, not a daily reset. So if you hit your token limit, you're not waiting until midnight, you're waiting for your oldest usage to roll off. So let's talk about tabs, because that has a real effect on your token usage. Claude gives you 3 tabs to work with: chat, Cowork, and code. If you've already watched my video on the difference between them, you'll know what each one is for. If not, I'll link it at the end of this one. It's worth watching alongside this one. But what you might not know yet is that each tab burns through tokens in completely different ways. Chat is the most efficient tab for standard text-based tasks. Brainstorming, research, quick questions. It keeps token usage lean because it's just text in and text out. Cowork is actually the heaviest usage. It burns through tokens faster than the other two because of what's happening behind the scenes. To verify it's doing things correctly, Cowork regularly takes screenshots of your virtual desktop, and images are expensive. A single 1000 x 1000 pixel screenshot costs around 1,300 tokens on its own. Multiply that across a long task and it adds up fast. This doesn't mean that you should avoid Cowork, it means that you should use it intentionally for tasks that genuinely need it. Code usually sits in the middle somewhere. It's optimized for technical work and can actually be very efficient if you manage it correctly, which brings us to a couple of commands worth knowing about. Typing /clear wipes the session history and starts fresh. Typing /compact does something smarter. It summarizes everything so far into a checkpoint, keeping the essential context without carrying the full weight of every exchange. If you're deep into a session and want to optimize your token usage, /compact is your friend. These only work in the code window, by the way. So let's talk about some token saving habits. The first is new task, new chat. This is the single biggest one. Don't keep one long thread running for different topics. Every new subject deserves a fresh chat, because starting over wipes the history and brings your token cost back to 0. Carrying old irrelevant conversations is just dead weight. The second tip is match the model to the task. Different models use different resources. Use Haiku for simple tasks like grammar checks. Sonnet is for your day-to-day writing and coding. And then save Opus for the genuinely complex stuff, hard decisions, deep reasoning, architectural thinking. Using a heavier model than the task requires is like driving a lorry instead of your car to the local shop. You'll get there and back, but you'll burn up much more fuel and still come back with exactly the same carton of milk. Now this is a nice simple one. Be surgical with what you paste in. Don't dump a 50-page PDF into Claude if you only need one section from it. Clean, trimmed input saves thousands of tokens compared to dropping in a raw file and hoping that Claude finds what it needs. The next tip is use plan mode before execution. When asking Claude for code, use plan mode first, before it starts writing code or making changes. Reviewing a text plan costs almost no tokens, but correcting half-written code costs a lot. So get agreement on the approach first to ensure that it understands what you want before it makes it. Now, something you might not have thought of is punctuation and code. Standard English text tokenizes efficiently, roughly 4 characters per token. Code is less efficient because programming languages use characters like brackets, braces, and semicolons that often each count as their own tokens. Now, it's not a reason to avoid coding in Claude, it's just useful context for why code sessions can feel heavier. Punctuation has a much lesser effect in the chat window, for example, but it's still worth considering to optimize and build efficient habits. And if you're one of those people who say please and thank you to Claude, I am too, but maybe you need to stop and save your tokens. Now, the next tip is to use Claude.md files for regular projects. If you're working on the same project repeatedly, put your standard instructions in a Claude.md file. Claude.md is a plain text file that you create and drop into any project folder. It's basically a permanent instruction prompt written in plain English that tells Claude how you want it to behave for that specific project. Your rules, your preferences, and your style. Claude reads that document once at the start of every session, so you never have to repeat yourself. If you're working on the same project repeatedly, it saves you a surprising number of tokens over time. The next thing to consider is timing. Now, these are estimated figures based on how the rolling window is documented, because Anthropic don't publish the exact mechanics. But Claude's usage limits work on a rolling 5-hour window, not a daily reset at midnight. That window starts from the moment that you send your first message. So if you start at 7 AM, that window closes at 12, and your usage begins rolling off. Start a new session at 12, and you've opened a second window. Another at 5 PM gives you a third window. That's potentially 3 full sessions across a working day instead of 1. The simple habit is start early. The earlier your first session, the more complete windows that you can fit in before you go to sleep. Let's talk numbers. These are estimated token limits per 5-hour window. On the Pro plan for $20 a month, you get around 44,000 tokens per window, which is a solid starting point for most users. On the Max 5X for $100 a month, you get roughly 5 times the Pro plan, around 220,000 tokens. On the Max 20X for $200 a month, you get around 880,000 tokens. At this level, hitting a limit in a normal daily use becomes unlikely. The Team Premium for $100 per seat gives around 6.25 times the Pro per session, which is actually higher than the Max 5X. Worth noting if you're considering it for a small team. There are weekly caps that heavy users can hit those, so you do need to factor that in the team plan. And then we have the enterprise plan. This plan removes limits and token usage. Instead, you pay per person or seat, as it's called. You also pay for how much you use rather than a fixed fee. It also has advanced security and admin controls. So honestly, most people starting out will be fine on the Pro plan. The limits only become a real issue when you're running Cowork heavily or you're doing long code sessions. Match your plan to your actual usage, not to what sounds impressive. Now, you've probably noticed that one of those habits was matching the right models, Haiku, Sonnet or Opus, to the right task. But how do you actually know which one to choose? That's exactly what this video here covers. I'll break down every model, what each one is built for, and the simple framework I use to decide which one to use for which task, so you're never leaving performance or tokens on the table. Click it and I'll see you there.